What is your biggest financial concern? Are you being as intentional with your finances as you could be? How confident are you that you'll reach your financial goals? How will life's transitions impact your financial plan? Welcome to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast with Tom Fleishel, founder, president, and CEO of Fleishel Financial Associates. Discover how we can help business owners, successful families, and corporate executives achieve clarity and confidence for life while providing tailored financial solutions that eliminate complexity and free you up to focus on what really matters in life to you and your family. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast with your host, Tom Fleishel. I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast. Hello, Tom. How are you today?
Good morning, RJ. Doing great.
You sent me some notes to get ready for this podcast, and I got to tell you, this is a podcast that is going to be very influential for me because this is something I'm going through with an aging parent. So why don't you introduce the topic for today?
Well, it's a very common topic that a lot of our clients and people that we know are dealing with: aging parents, dementia, and family decision making.
Yeah, that is something that is, you walk a tightrope. Now, my dad passed away 3 years ago, but probably the 2 or 3 years before he passed, he was declining, and it was a touchy situation because you want to be respectful, but at the same time you want to help. And they want to stay independent. And boy, you got to thread a needle. And sometimes when you don't thread the needle, and I missed the threading a couple times, and it was not pretty.
You might get stuck by the needle. Look out!
Oh, yeah, yeah. And it's difficult for both, for the child and for the parent.
Yes, it really is. If you have aging parents, and at some point, most people are going to, it's not always easy to determine whether memory or cognitive problems are the results of aging or something more serious like dementia or Alzheimer's. One day your mom or dad might be fine. The next day you're going to find the TV remote in the freezer. Is something going on, or are they just getting older? So I think regardless of the cause, things are likely to get complicated. And eventually the members of the older generation, they get to that gray area where they may not be able to make the necessary decisions to manage their own homes and finances. I think it kind of happens gradually, but people with dementia or Alzheimer's disease may slowly lose their ability to make decisions. So it can be hard to tell when it's time to intervene.
Yes, that is the toughest part, when to intervene. And again, like I said, that's a landmine. Because sometimes it's helpful, and then sometimes look out. And, it also depends on the relationship you have with your parents. I know, friends of mine who didn't have a great relationship with their parents, and then they were forced to take care of them. And that was really a touchy and a difficult situation for both the parent and for my friend.
Yeah, that would be tough. So even if the person looks and feels fine, sometimes they seem normal, but people experiencing even mild forms of dementia may not be able to tell when something is off or something is really happening, and if someone's trying to take advantage of them financially. So it's very important that everybody kind of stays attuned, to what's going on. And the more, you don't want too many hands in the pot, but at the same time, it's good that we'll talk about, who can be some protectors in this situation to prevent from some of these abuses.
I think communication is extremely important. I've seen friends stop talking to siblings over this, and it helped us, my family, my sister, my 2 brothers. We have specific roles designated. For example, my sister, who lives near my mom, she's sort of the de facto caretaker, or she checks in on her, where with myself and my other brother, we take care of the financial situation and make sure the bills are paid. And then my youngest brother is sort of the safety valve, and he'll help out my sister because he lives down there too, to help out. So communication, at least in my experience, is extremely important.
It is. And even if you have good communication, there can still be some potential family squabbles. This gray area often causes a lot of tensions in families. Some family members argue that mom or dad is fine and that they've always been able to take care of themselves. Others might have the opinion they find it difficult to broach the subject of taking control away from a parent, who's always been so independent.
Yeah.
The senior family member will likely put up a bit of a fight for fear of losing their independence, wondering if their children are just trying to take their money, take advantage. All they want is my money. So there's all this dynamic going on that, is really, really important that I think, really advanced planning and discussions and conversations as we go into these different phases and hopefully before things get really bad can really help a lot.
Yeah, I think it's vital to have a conversation with your, siblings and say, okay, they're getting to an age, even before they start to decline. I mean, once they hit a certain age, you should really talk with your siblings and say, okay, how are we going to handle this when the something happens with them and they're incapacitated or they're declining? How who's going to take care of what, that type of thing, and designate it, because that's been helpful. As I pointed out before with us, it's been extremely helpful. My sister knows what she wants, what she has to do, and we don't step on her toes and she doesn't step on our toes, and things go as smooth as they possibly can, because it's never a smooth ride with the parent, because they're fighting for their independence. They know something's not right, and it's scary for them, and it's frustrating, and you're dealing with all those emotions, and it's something that I know, as I said before, you're walking a fine line.
Yeah, and then there's this whole concern about financial abuse. It's another potential issue that can arise in this situation. You've got caregivers, you've got scam artists, and even some family members may try to take advantage of someone with cognitive impairment. In the early stages, I think picking up on this is extremely difficult as the impairment isn't always obvious, but it's important to know, I think, that cognitive changes can be happening without any outward signs of difficulty. So we've had several, unfortunately, situations where some clients have had some victim situations with scams. One was where a person had a health event, but their mental acuity was still pretty sharp, but they were a little vulnerable.
Right.
And they had some problems with their computer and they were trying to get help from somebody online.
Oh
And
no.
then they were going to say, well, I see that you're getting hacked. So in order for me to protect you, you're going to need to send me Apple Pay cards to the tune of $500 at a time so I can make sure that you're protected from hackers. $20,000 later.
Oh my. That's
Yeah.
terrible.
So, it's just so many things out there. There's all these romance scams. There's the granddaughter that's calling in jail and needs money to get bailed out of jail in Mexico.
Yeah.
Simple thing like, why don't you call mom and dad and make sure that that's not happening? Because usually there's something as stupid as that, that's really going on. It's crazy.
It's, and we ran into a situation with my dad. Now, my dad passed away 3 years ago, but before that, we noticed something and we weren't really 100% sure, because my dad was a very independent guy and very confident, and we didn't question him. And there are two things he did that we look back on and we're like, oh, we should have done something. One, for some reason, he decided to lease a car at the age of, like 85. And we're like, why are you doing this? You already have a car that you owned, but we didn't really pursue it. And then the other thing is he started handing out a lot of money to the grandkids, which was fine. But when he passed away and we started looking at the finances, he gave away a lot of money that he probably shouldn't have at the time.
Mhm.
And again, it wasn't horrendous because it was the grandkids, and they're putting it in the bank, and that's okay. But to your point, a stranger or someone can convince them. And again, with my dad leasing a car, it was an associate of his convinced him to lease a car at the age of like 84, 85, which made
Oh, wow.
no.
Hopefully it wasn't a Bentley or something.
No, it wasn't. But here's the thing. I mean, he got the car decked out. The one thing that stands out, he got heated seats, and he lived in Florida.
Oh,
And
geez.
I'm like, that
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Did he
but
get the windshield, the
again,
wipers on the headlights, for the snow too,
no, no, yeah, didn't do that, but
Oh,
you're right. I mean, it was a very difficult situation with our dad because he was a very big personality, and he was someone we didn't question. And then when he started to
hmm.
decline, we did notice things, but we were not confident enough to say, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing?" And some things happened that weren't a catastrophe, but weren't beneficial for my mom after he was gone. So
So let's talk about some of the ways that we can help prevent and handle these problems. And I think it's all about advanced planning and open conversation. So first off, seniors, everybody should appoint someone as their financial power of attorney. It's a legal document that gives them authority to act on their behalf in case they're incapacitated physically or mentally. And that's going to be one of the most powerful ways to address these issues. Someone they trust, someone who's competent and knows their situation. There's also something we use called a trusted contact. Now, that person doesn't have as much control. They're just someone that would have the ability to ascertain, well, I see that Susie is acting a lot of abnormal behavior here. So it's something I haven't seen in a long time. So I could call this trusted contact and say, are you noticing some of these things too that are happening with this person? So we want to make sure all those things are in place, because if they wait too long and no longer have the cognitive ability to make financial decisions, someone's going to need to apply for a conservatorship instead, which is a much more complicated process. It takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money. So our firm has relied several times on a designated trusted contact to provide insight. If we suspect somebody's starting to lose cognitive ability or might be a victim of financial abuse, they don't have to access their accounts. They don't really have that kind of access, but they
right.
know that person and they have a long-standing relationship. So that's one way that we can make sure that things are protected in advance. And then if we get to the point where we know there's issues and now it's time that we need to, okay, mom or dad are not ready to step aside. We know they should, but they're not ready. So what happens then?
Hmm.
A third party can get involved to determine whether or not the senior can make financial decisions on their own. It's a good way to get a resolution by mitigating the tension that we're going to often see between family members. It's a neutral third party concludes that the senior parent is unable to care for themselves. It's a much different situation than family members arguing their opinions.
Yeah.
So there's testing by neuropsychologists to determine the senior's condition and whether or not their decision-making capabilities are intact. And that the decision of a qualified professional can answer a lot of the questions family members may have. Now, in our experience, more often, another objective opinion on a parent's mental acuity can be provided by the current family physician. They totally, know the person. They've been dealing with their health and wellness for years. They could provide an honest and professional opinion on their condition. So
That's
there's that, between other professionals, you just don't want to be put in that situation. So I think, and in our experience, the best scenario is if a senior is willing to acknowledge they're starting to slip and resign as trustee of their own trust, or have their assigned power of attorney take things from that point forward.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's the best, most ideal scenario. And that's why, even before this might ever have happened, mom or dad, what do you think would be the best situation if you get to the point where things are beginning to slip, you're not able to manage your affairs? What in your mind would be the best way for us to transition for somebody to help you then? So having that conversation in advance maybe could help prepare them and the family for, this situation. So all about that communication.
And but the thing you have to watch out for, and we're going through this right now. 2 phone calls ago with my mom. I call her twice a week. My sister sees her every day. She stops in because she lives, after she's a teacher, after she leaves school, she can stop by and see her or call her. My other brothers call occasionally also. So between the 4 of us, my mom's speaking to someone almost every day, which is a good thing. But the situation is, she's in a state where she told me 2 phone calls ago, well, maybe I should consider going into a facility. my conversation with her this past Sunday, she made this statement, I'm never going into a facility, so don't even think about it.
Mhm.
So these are the things you're dealing with because they change their minds a lot. And then how do you plan? How do you plan when they're changing minds like that?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. And then just what can happen among family members makes it even worse. Regular family meetings should be held to make sure everyone has a voice and can communicate their concerns. If necessary, a mediator or another neutral person can attend to make sure the meeting is productive and that the result is what actually is best for the senior parent. Another way that we found helpful to prepare and open the lines of communication is something we call a family summit. We've had success with offering our clients a family summit where we bring together the parents and heirs to open the lines of communication regarding their wishes. Some of the topics include mom and dad's values. What's important to them? What's their mission in life? What do they want to convey to the next generation? What are their estate plan goals? How should it go with everything happening in their situation? Who's responsible for what if one or both of them are unable to manage their affairs? This kind of lays out the expectations, can help prepare heirs for who's in charge of their finances or health care, for example. A lot of times attorneys are trying to lay out a plan for a family, and they might say, okay, well, let's talk about your two heirs, Johnny and Beverly. We're going to make sure that they are assigned as your power of attorney and or successor trustee, and all that might get put into place. And guess what? It's never communicated to them. They don't understand the responsibilities. They don't understand the potential liabilities. They have no idea. They have families. They have a business, their career. They don't have the time to do this. So many times those people are just assume they're going to be the best choice when they haven't talked about, well, what are the pros and cons of naming family members to be either the power of attorney, successor trustee, or whatever, or is somebody else in a better position? Sometimes there's a professional trustee that might be better, their attorney or somebody else. So those kind of conversations are definitely important. And we find a lot of times that hasn't been discussed and the pros and cons of those choices laid out carefully.
That's interesting because in our situation, yeah, I never thought about that. I just always assumed that, being the oldest in my family, that I would be the one who, would be leaned on the most. And then my sister's next in line. So I would talk with her and it was just, that's the way we thought about it. I never even thought about going outside the family unit to deal with this type of scenario.
You can also have a joint situation where if you did have a trust in place, you can have co-successor trustees. You could have a professional corporate successor trustee and a family member. The family member can fire the corporate trustee if they're not happy, but the family member can rely upon the corporate trustee because they're licensed, bonded, and insured. They're never going to get sick or die. They're an ongoing concern that's professionally trained to manage these situations. But not everybody can afford those. They're not always the most attractive opportunity.
Right.
But certainly those all kinds of decisions need to be addressed ahead of time. So, everybody's going to have to deal with this, whether it's their parent or the in-laws.
Right.
It's always better to have intentional plans in place. So get their estate documents up to date, like their power of attorney, healthcare surrogate designations, living will, which is the life support, and then the regular wills done. Let me wrap up with a personal experience that I think is really trying to tie this together because my wife's dad, 87 years old, passed away unexpectedly at the young age of 87. But for all his life, he was so worried that if he drew up a will, he was going to die.
Oh.
So he never had any of the estate documents in place. His wife, my wife's mom, was experiencing advanced dementia, and dad dies unexpectedly. She's in a total pickle. She's up in Georgia, separate state from where we live. So my wife had to spend weeks in Georgia, hire an attorney, settle her dad's estate. We call it intestate without a will. That's a real mess. And then establish a guardianship for her mom.
Wow.
All those hassles could have been avoided with some basic advanced estate planning. And then it was not only difficult to set that up in Georgia, but then we live in Florida, so she wanted to get mom down here. So we now had to get another attorney involved down here to set up the guardianship for her mom in Florida. There's all kinds of legal ramifications, very strict guidelines that have to be met for that. So again, if people don't plan, you plan to fail. And so sit down with your folks, talk about these issues, communicate with the family, put these plans in place, make it a priority. Don't kick that can down the road because you never know the next day what might happen.
Yeah, that's some story there, Tom, and I can feel the or imagine the stress you and your wife were under because it's things just pop up that you're not expecting and you're not prepared for, and it's almost sometimes a learning experience as you go. So this was a really important topic to dive into, Tom. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Contact information, Tom. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can go online to our website at fleishelfinancial.com. They can call our number at 386-738-1800. And they can also go online and Google Clarity and Confidence for Life. It's our book that we just released this year. It's on Amazon as bestsellers in the financial planning section.
Excellent. That's great news to hear. Congratulations, Tom. And okay, most importantly, thank you for listening to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening. And for everyone at Clarity and Confidence for Life, I'm RJ Malik, and we look forward to you joining us for the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast. Click the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes when they become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Raymond James. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your individual situation. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Fleishel Financial Associates is not a broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services.